When you think about the saints, Saint Joseph is, well, he's in a category all his own, right? His closeness to Jesus and Mary, it makes you wonder about his own holiness. It's a question that gets right to the very heart of his special role in salvation history. So let's dive in and really unpack this.
So let's get right to it. Was St. Joseph sinless, just like the Virgin Mary? It seems like a simple yes or no question. But the answer is, well, it's a lot more interesting than that. See, with Mary, her sinlessness is a defined dogma of the Church. It's settled. But for Joseph, it's a bit of a different story. And to really get it, we've got to go back to the very beginning, to the first thing the Bible ever tells us about him.
And that first description, we find it in the Gospel of Matthew. It gives Joseph this title that honestly, theologians have been wrestling with and unpacking for centuries. And that title is a just man.
Now, when you hear the word just, you might think, fair or someone who follows the rules. But in the Bible, this word is packed with so much more meaning. It's talking about a deep, profound righteousness, basically moral perfection. And guys like St. Peter Chrysologus, they looked at this and said, whoa, this is basically shorthand for a perfect man, someone who has all the virtues. So this isn't just the Bible saying he was a good guy. No, this is the very foundation for everything we believe about his holiness.
And this idea builds into a really important theological principle, one that St. Thomas Aquinas put perfectly. He basically said, look, when God picks someone for a special job, he doesn't just throw them in the deep end. He gives them the tools, the grace they need to actually do it. And let's be real, what job could possibly be bigger or more important than being the guardian of the Redeemer himself? So you see, Joseph's holiness wasn't just a nice personal quality. It was absolutely essential for the mission he was given.
Okay, so if God prepared him, what did that actually look like? What kind of graces are we talking about here? Well, following that same logic, theologians have pointed to three really special, extraordinary graces or privileges that they believe Joseph received.
First up, tradition says he was sanctified right in his mother's womb, kind of like what happened with Jeremiah and John the Baptist. Second, he was what's called confirmed in grace, which is a fancy way of saying he got this special protection to keep him from sinning. And third, and this is a big one, he was immune from concupiscence. You know that inner pull we all have towards sin, that struggle? Tradition says he didn't have that. He was just pure, through and through.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Joseph's job was totally one of a kind. He had to exercise fatherly authority over the Son of God. I mean, wow. Because of that insane, unparalleled role, theologians are pretty convinced that the amount of grace he received was off the charts, even more than the greatest apostles and martyrs. That's how important his job was. Okay, so he's got all these amazing graces. He's basically perfect, which leads to a really important question. If he was that holy, did he even need Jesus to save him?
And the answer is a huge, 100% absolutely yes. And this right here is a super important point we can't miss.
Look, nobody gets a free pass, not a single person. Christ's sacrifice on the cross is the only source of salvation for every single human being, period. Tradition tells us that when Joseph died, he went to join the other holy people in what's sometimes called the limbo of the fathers, all of them waiting for Christ to open up heaven. So you might be thinking, wait, how did he get those graces during his life if the cross hadn't happened yet? Great question. They were given to him based on the foreseen merits of Jesus' sacrifice. God, outside of time, applied the grace of the cross to him ahead of schedule. It's the exact same principle behind Mary's Immaculate Conception.
All right, so we've settled that. He definitely needed a savior, just like the rest of us. But that brings us right back to the big question we started with. Did he manage to live his whole life without ever committing an actual, personal, on-purpose sin?
And this is where we have to be really clear about something. There's a huge difference between two things in the Church. On one hand, you have dogma. That's a divinely revealed truth, something the Church says, this is it, you have to believe this. Mary's sinlessness? That's a dogma. But then you have something called pious tradition. This is a belief that's been held for centuries, it's widely respected, but it's not an official defined dogma. And St. Joseph's freedom from actual sin, it fits perfectly into that second box, pious tradition. And the thinking behind this tradition, especially from church fathers like St. John Chrysostom, is pretty powerful. He basically asks, think about this. Here's a guy who was so righteous, he was willing to show mercy even when the law gave him an out. Remember when he decided to divorce Mary quietly to protect her? How could a man with that kind of character ever deliberately choose to do something wrong? It just doesn't seem possible. And so that's where we land, the consistent view of theologians, this really strong and respected tradition in the church, is that, yep, St. Joseph was preserved from committing any actual sin for his entire life, before he was married to Mary and after, the whole shebang.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now, because when you do, you get this absolutely breathtaking picture of holiness in the Holy Family.
So here's the final breakdown. You've got Jesus. He's inherently sinless because he's God. Simple as that. Then you have Mary. She was preserved from all sin, including original sin, by a totally unique grace, and that's a dogma. And then you have Joseph. He was preserved from all actual personal sin by an extraordinary grace fitting for his mission. And that's a powerful, pious tradition. So you have three unique kinds of sinlessness, all fitting together perfectly in God's plan.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Joseph is so often the silent one, right? He's the guardian, always in the background. He protects, he provides, he just obeys. In our world, which is so incredibly loud and chaotic, what can we take away from the quiet, strong, protective character of the man God trusted with his own son and wife? What can that teach us today? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.